Hello, and welcome to this episode of the World Discord Podcast, where this week we take a little detour from our Who Benefits series, which itself was a little detour from our fascism series, which, of course, was a detour from our regular series on global conflicts.
We
This
really
week
need to figure
bringing
out
you an
where
episode about Israel and Gaza and the West Bank. I'm
it's like
Joel
it's
Ostrow.
like the show doesn't know where we're going. I've
What
talked
is
over
that?
you now.
You know, I was going to say, though, there is a thread that connects them. It's not necessarily a strong thread. I wouldn't want to, make clothing out of it, but there is one
I believe the thread is crap that's happening in the world.
in which the U.S. is very much at the center.
Right. And, Discord. And by the way, in the middle of that, while I was talking over him, Joel mentioned that our show today will be on what?
Israel, Gaza, the West Bank, and various things that Netanyahu is doing.
Excellent.
Or responsible for.
Yep. Hi, Joel. I'm
Wait,
Brian.
who are you again?
I'm Brian Endless.
I've heard of him.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, let's get started. By the way, you had a very calm, soothing voice. That's very unlike you.
Yeah.
During the intro.
Should I go?
All right.
that goes creepy, doesn't it?
It is.
All right. So to bring everyone back, on October 7th of 2023, Hamas and related organizations carried out a horrific attack in Israel that resulted in about 1,200 deaths and what was it, 250 some odd hostages who were held for a long time. In Gaza, Israel's response was all-out genocidal war in Gaza, sort of to parallel what I focused on at the beginning of our Ukraine update a couple weeks ago. I just want to present that in what is it now, 2.5 years since that attack, more than 71,000 Palestinians in Gaza have been killed, over 170,000 wounded. These figures initially presented by the Gaza Ministry of Health have been confirmed by the UN as being conservative estimates, and after initially commenting, the Israeli government has accepted at least the death toll figure according to a variety of sources. In that time, Israel's casualties have numbered around 850, I want to say. Well, the source that I found wanted to say. The same time in the West Bank, where Israeli fueled violence has been accelerating over the last, 6 to 8 months.
Yep.
But since October 7th, 2023, about 1,200 Palestinians have been killed, including 235 children. I don't have a figure for Israeli casualties in that side of the conflict. I imagine they are very, very few. And I don't know that we'll be talking much about Lebanon, but Israel has recently unleashed violence across Lebanon, including the use of white phosphorus bombs that have been confirmed by numerous sources, which are a clear violation of basically every law of war. But at least 4,000 Lebanese have been killed. That's a grotesquely conservative number, as is the 16,000 wounded. Again, Israeli casualties from the Lebanese side, since this has begun, can probably be counted on a couple of hands at most.
Very quickly, by the way, I want to talk about the horror that's going on here, besides the use of the word genocide, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit more. Just that white phosphorus question, you threw that out there as an academic, and I want to make sure everybody realizes what that does. This is why students love my classes.
This is why, mine too. This is why it's of every war crime. I'll let Brian present the gory
if you were
details
hit.
of phosphorus.
If you were hit with a white phosphorus splinter from a bomb, or sometimes it's in the form of bullets, it doesn't just burn you, it sets you on fire. and it literally continues to burn your body until the piece of phosphorus comes out. And if it goes through your body, it leaves remnants behind and burns you from the inside. It is absolutely horrific. It's arguably worse than chemical weapons. It's a high-end version of a chemical weapon. It's a good way to put it, and it's been banned
Yeah.
by all countries, including Israel, by treaty.
It's been a while since I've read about it, but my memory says that water makes it worse.
It does. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
pouring
Okay,
water
I'm
on
right.
it. Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
it's
absolutely.
insane.
Yeah.
But just to finish up my intro, like I do not at all mean to suggest that the casualty figures necessarily equate to commentary on the rationale for a conflict, um, or anything like that. But I will note that was it last week or the week before that Pope Leo repudiated the notion of just war all the way back to St. Augustine. That this did not get nearly the attention it deserved, but he
Right.
basically um, condemned just war theory as a crock, which is basically how I've taught it forever.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'll turn it
Yes,
over to you to.
it's very hard to have anything like a just war. I want to start out, by the way, where we always start out on this, which is Joel and I both have Jewish heritage.
Okay.
We are not opposed to the state of Israel.
Quite the
Speaking for
contrary.
myself, or the country,
No,
am
no, I
in
said quite the
favor.
contrary.
Oh,
I support
exactly. Yeah.
the existence of an Israeli state.
Correct. Nope. Agreed. We're both in favor of the Palestinian and Israeli people, in
Right,
favor of the Palestinian people having security and their own state, and the Israeli
right,
people having security and their own state.
right.
And much of it here is Hamas on one side, a violent group of Palestinians, and others, Hezbollah and others in Lebanon. And it is the Israeli government. And it is the leaders of the Israeli government that are absolutely worthy of not only being critiqued but being condemned here. And that's not anti-Semitic, and that has nothing to do with Zionism.
I
I'm talking about
I know that you have seen it. I urge everyone uh, to find the eloquent and passionate statement by the actor Mandy Patinkin, who's also been quite a vocal activist, both for uh, uh, the uh, the need for a state of Israel and security for the state of Israel, and condemning the Israeli government. Um, that statement came, I'm not sure the date, but the first week of June of 2026.
I've seen him make
This
it at least
time.
4 or 5 times
But
since
this the
October
one I'm referring to
2023.
from early June of 2026. This just last week, I think was the strongest and most eloquent yet, and
Yeah.
clearly like very passionate.
Yeah. No,
Particularly,
he is a Jew who is completely opposed to the Israeli government and everything they're doing here.
yeah,
And it gives a very, very straightforward response. So let's get
yeah,
the update, and then
yeah.
we can talk about this a little bit more. We added West Bank this time because things are not just happening in Gaza, and the news tends to hide the West Bank. That being said, the news isn't talking much about Gaza either.
It isn't.
And one of the things that Israel has had a history of since 1967, when they first occupied the West Bank and Gaza, they have had a history of doing things while the news is looking in other places. And they are often very specific in their plans to do that. So they've been making what are called changes on the ground, or facts on the ground in Gaza. And especially, they've been taking advantage of the attention focused on Iran and focused on Ukraine and focused on Trump. And they are taking advantage of that in the West Bank and creating facts on the ground in the West Bank. So let's go through those briefly. The numbers, Joel gave some of them. What was your, my death number in Gaza is 73,000. Joel, you gave a number at the beginning.
I
What
think it
was
was
it?
71,000, but that was
Yeah,
as of the end of April, I think, or something. So
yeah.
yeah, makes sense.
Our numbers are similar. And again, you're not going to get two numbers that are exactly the same when you're talking about how many people are dead. These
But it
are
is important to say that the UN has forcefully said that that number is
conservative.
wildly conservative. Not just
Absolutely.
conservative, but probably nowhere near accurate.
Absolutely. So we've got that. More importantly, in a lot of ways, 90% of the people of Gaza are displaced, and
Yeah.
90% of the homes and buildings in Gaza are damaged or destroyed. And
Mhm.
I'd say more importantly, because if you're talking about a genocide is not just killing people, it is pushing people out of their homes and out of their way of life. And right
Destroying the
now,
conditions of life, I think, is the language, right? Or yeah, yeah.
exactly. And yeah, what we're looking at is clearly a genocide of displacement. These people aren't going to have anything to go back to.
Mhm.
And it would take decades to rebuild Gaza, assuming, of course, that the Trump family doesn't turn it into a resort. And by the way, the resort plans explicitly call for homes for about 50% of the previous citizens of Gaza. And who knows what's going to happen to the rest of them.
Yeah.
So, yeah, even in the best case scenario, healthcare is overwhelmed. There is famine. There is politically caused starvation. Is famine. There is still
There's
very
no
limited aid.
education.
Yeah, no education, limited aid coming in. The Israelis are still stopping aid. Ships full of aid and protesters are still being arrested, stopped and arrested as they
And
come in.
tortured and raped, according to recent confirmed reports
Exactly. Indirect fit by the Israeli military, by
by
the
the
way,
Israeli military or
sadly.
security. Yeah, yeah.
Indirect fatalities are on the rise this year during the quote unquote ceasefire. And anybody who's followed the Middle East, forget about just Israel and its conflicts, but Middle East conflicts, you got to understand, folks, ceasefires don't mean you stop killing people.
No,
They mean that you don't kill people as much, and you usually don't do, like, tanks and planes across new borders as opposed to where they were.
right.
But even during this ceasefire this year, 1,000 Palestinians to 1,200 have been killed by Israeli fire. And it's absolutely incredible how much is still happening. Just last week, the Israelis announced they were leaving the zone that they had set up in the north, and they were going to take over half the country again
Yeah.
in their quote unquote attempt to quote unquote eliminate Hamas, which has been going on since October 2023. And I say quote unquote because everybody knows they're not going to eliminate Hamas, and they're not trying to
Mhm.
eliminate Hamas. That is something the Israeli government is saying to cover the killing of civilians. If they wanted to eliminate Hamas, and they could be, the Hamas would be eliminated by this point in time. That's just the reality of the situation. I want to switch to the West Bank, and then we can talk about both of these. The West Bank, Gaza is about 2 million Palestinians, by the way. The West Bank, about 3.2, 3.4 million
Oh,
Palestinians.
I thought there were more in the West Bank. Oh,
That's the most recent number I have. It could be
okay.
higher. I think five,
Yeah,
5
I mean,
million.
I haven't looked. It was just an assumption. For some reason, my brain
Yeah.
held that it was
No,
more like 9 million.
yeah,
Okay.
I think
Oh,
5
no.
million is the total number. And I could
Okay.
be off there. I
No,
used a couple of main sources.
no, I trust.
That was a BBC was that particular source, and they're usually good.
You're usually pretty good.
Um,
Better than ABC.
Right. The West Bank and Gaza are ruled by different groups. They are the Palestinian Authority versus Hamas in Gaza, Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. They have had closer relationships with Israel, but those have also completely broken down. And there's effectively no communications going on there. The key element in the West Bank
I
since,
need to interrupt
yeah,
because, yeah, I personally don't like that presentation of it.
please.
That the relations have broken down. Israel has severed the relations and
Yes,
destroyed the relations.
correct. Very, very
There's
actively.
no other way to put it.
Yeah. No, and we'll talk about the person in charge who's actively doing that too.
Okay.
That's important. It's important here. Since 1967, Israel has been settling the West Bank. They have had Israeli settlers, usually hardcore Zionist settlers, some who are coming in the country as immigrants, others who have lived there for a long time, who are moving into the West Bank. They are sometimes setting up their own villages. They are often just kicking Palestinians out of their homes. These settlers do pretty much whatever they want to Palestinians in the West Bank. In a technical sense, the Israeli military is supposed supposed to protect everyone. In fact, the Israeli military does one of a couple of things. They either ignore what's happening and don't show up until days later, or they watch as the Israelis do things to the Palestinians, killings and tortures and other things, burning homes, burning villages, or they participate. And
which
the
is more
Israeli
common.
military is an active participant.
Yeah, because even in the second, they'll stand by and watch, and then if a Palestinian throws a rock at one of these Israeli settlers, then the military comes in and usually kills the rock thrower and
Right.
arrests everyone near
Yeah.
that person.
Yeah.
And the settlers, that they're not, the most common practice that I'm aware of is seizing property from Palestinians residents in the West Bank territories, kicking them out of their homes, taking their possession, just stealing their property, their homes,
Yes.
and possession.
Yeah, they kick them out at gunpoint and often at threat of torching the homes
Yeah.
is what they will typically do. They also, by the way, will take over and in many cases destroy the olive groves that are a primary
Yep.
source of income
Yep.
for the Palestinians. And they've made it unsafe to go into those olive groves because they pick people off and shoot people, including kids, who are doing things to try to grow or harvest the olives. So very nasty situation. And of course, as Joe was mentioning just a minute ago, this is all a planned policy of the Israeli government. This is not an accident. This is not something they're just allowing to happen. It has particularly increased under the current Netanyahu government. The person in charge of the West Bank, in charge of settlers, in charge, which, they're not supposed to have settlers, in charge of settlers, in charge of policing, in charge of the military, is a gentleman named Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, which I think is the correct pronunciation. He is the leader of the Religious Zionist Party. It is one of the furthest right parties that is in Israel. They've got
Is he a cabinet member?
He's a cabinet member, yes. So he's actually one of the lead ministers. They have 7 seats in the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, out of 120, so a minority, but they're an important part of Netanyahu's government. The government will fall without them. They represent somewhere from 10 to 15% of Israelis. And even there, those aren't all religious people. They're also non-religious Zionists and far right. We've talked about this a little bit in previous episodes, but it's important in the West Bank. Zionism is not a religious movement. Originally, it wasn't religious at all. It was, a political movement. In recent decades, the religious right in Israel has picked it up, but somewhere around 50% of Israelis are atheist or agnostic, have no religious beliefs at all now. And a decent percentage of the Zionists are there, but the religious Zionist party is this particular group that is leading this. This is a minister who has been outspoken in favor of settlers moving into Palestinian homes in the West Bank and expanding, outspoken saying violence is no problem, outspoken in supporting soldiers, even in the few cases where the Israelis have investigated soldier violence. This minister is outspoken in just supporting the soldiers flat out. So it is a significant issue when one of your leading cabinet members is leading the charge. And the thing we didn't mention here is settlers increasing settlements in occupied territories is not just problematic, it is by definition, according to the Geneva Convention, a war crime. If a territory is occupied by war, and both the West Bank and Gaza are, the occupier may not settle that territory, period.
More than that, you mentioned earlier 1967, right?
Right.
Can you maybe give the little history of, because this was part of the settlement in 1967 as well, right? It's explicit that Israel would not.
Exactly. No question about it. In 1967, after the war between Israel and its neighbors, Israel came out in possession of the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, the Golan Heights with Syria, and the Sinai Desert. And, the Sinai peninsula was something that they traded back with
Yep.
Israel, but they have kept these other territories since that point in time. There was an explicit agreement they would not settle. And then we also had the Oslo Accords much later, and the Oslo Accords set up a quote unquote Palestinian government, the Palestinian Authority, that was supposed to independently govern in the West Bank and Gaza. They've never fully independently governed. The Israelis are always in control of those territories. And that also said that we're not going to be any more settlements. So the
But
Israeli
it is
government
important to
has
note
agreed
too
to
that
this.
all of that language about settlements is unnecessary because of the Geneva Conventions and other laws of
Absolutely.
war.
This is also a place that the international community is absolutely together on this up until this
Except for maybe the
administration,
United States.
including the United States. The United
But not
Nations,
now.
right.
Yeah.
No, the United Nations regularly chastises and condemns Israel for increasing settlements. And up until the current administration, that was something the U.S. always agreed with. Our foreign policy, State Department policy has been Israel should not increase settlements because it is just a significant problem that makes everything worse. So, Joel, I think that's where we are. More dead and wounded every day in Gaza and in the West Bank. And I guess we can end now.
Why are we talking about the West Bank now? I'm like, what's
So,
different now compared to what Israel has been doing sort of episodically for the last 50 years?
absolutely. Two things. The first is that the settler push is increasing, and it is increasing because of the current politics. This is in no small part a case of Benjamin Netanyahu once again protecting his own skin. And in the violence in Gaza, we've seen Netanyahu's policies that are keeping the conflict going and trying to keep his popularity ratings up. In the initial invasion of Lebanon, the same. In the attack on Iran, the same. The ongoing war with Iran, the ongoing war in Lebanon. These are all supporting Netanyahu. And the number one group that supports Netanyahu is this
The
religious
extreme right.
Zionist party and the others in the extreme right. And their number one goal is to take over the West Bank. I've said this before. You've agreed that we've said this before on our show. This is the number one place, by the way, where I critique and argue with Palestinian activists. First, if you're a Palestinian activist and you hate all Jewish people, you've got a problem and you need to get past that. But
Right.
this is one that Palestinian activists use and that members of the Israeli government use. It's this comment from the river to the sea.
Yeah.
Meaning that if you're a Zionist Jew, you want Israel that goes from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean. If you are Palestinian, you want a Palestine that goes from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean. And the clear, direct implication in both of those is in the first one, no Palestinians, and the second one, no Jews.
Or at least no representation in government for those in
Exactly.
a unitary state.
These are flat out on both sides calls for genocide.
Yeah.
And they are flat out horrific, no matter who is saying them. It started, by the way, with Arab states in 1948 trying
Yeah.
to wipe out the new state of Israel. But
Right.
now the Israeli government is using it openly. There were always people in Israel on the far right who used it, but now we have government ministers openly calling for an Israeli state from the river to the sea. And it is exasperating an already horrific problem and making it harder to solve the Gaza conflict at the same time, making it
That's
harder to
really
solve
key.
the
Well,
Iran
making it harder to solve all of it, right? The
any
more
conflict.
settlements there are in the West Bank, the more difficult it is going to be to have a lasting peace, right?
Absolutely.
Because that will
And
require Israelis to vacate those settlement areas
yeah,
and go back to Israel. There is historical precedent much for those actions, but the more settlers there are, the harder it is to do, which is
absolutely.
why the extreme right
Yeah,
wants more and more, and why the Israeli government is supporting
The
occurring.
Israelis kicked their own settlers out of Gaza at one point, to start to make the peace deal there. So that
Yeah,
was something they've done.
exactly.
Not with this government though. And then the other thing we're not mentioning is every single time the Israelis kill people, and every single time they push settlers out of their homes, they militarize
Yeah.
Palestinians, and especially young Palestinians. This
Mhm.
is going to lead to more violence from Palestinians. And by the way, once again, you might think it's contradictory. The number one thing the Israeli right wants the Palestinians to do is,
Oh, to fight.
yeah, to attack,
Hmm.
to take terrorist actions. For the Israelis on the right to be able to say, I told you so, they're violent terrorists. And this is very clearly pushing Palestinians into those positions and radicalizing them. I mean, when we talk about radicalizing, just think, how would you feel if your grandmother was killed by someone from the next town over? If a gang of people came in and took your house and the other houses on your block and kicked you out? If they regularly killed kids as they were working in their yards? This is the situation that is radicalizing Palestinians on purpose, and it is a government policy. It makes an incredibly difficult situation all the worse.
Um, it is also, is it not radicalizing further the Israeli population?
Absolutely, and that's also the purpose of it. Israel doesn't have a controlled media per se, although it's almost as much as the United States in terms of corporate control. But when Israel is at war, there's a rally around the flag effect, and the Israeli people get more conservative and are more in favor of the war. So the Israeli people were losing faith in the war in Gaza. The war in Lebanon was especially popular the first time
And the
that.
Iran war, was it not?
And then the Iran war was very popular because the Israeli people really do hate Hezbollah for bombing into northern Israel. Israel's also going into Lebanon. And they really, really, the Israeli people really, really believe that Iran is ready to nuke them at any time. That's like
That's
90%
part of government
popularity.
propaganda.
Exactly. And that's part of propaganda Netanyahu's very much been behind. Oh, just
40
skipping to the
years.
United States for a minute. I don't know if you caught it. It was ironic. Over the weekend,
Mm.
Trump announced that Iran had promised that they are not going to seek a nuclear weapon,
Mm.
and talked about this as a gigantic breakthrough.
Mm.
And I haven't mentioned to him that the Ayatollahs have been saying that since the early 1980s.
Yep.
And Iran has always consistently said they are
They
not
have
seeking
no
a nuclear
interest.
weapon, and it's anti-Islamic for
Yep.
anyone to have a nuclear weapon. They want everyone in the Middle East to get rid of their nuclear weapons, which means Israel, frankly.
Well, Trump has also proclaimed that we have won the war with Iran something like 475 times in the
Exactly.
last couple months. So,
Yeah, I was going to go
while
with
also
12.
saying it'll end soon. Yeah,
Yeah.
you can't live
Let's
in
get
any.
back to Israel. When Trump
Let's get back
keeps
to Israel.
sneaking
Can
in,
you comment on, since we're on the subject? Have there been? Are you aware of recent numbers suggesting degree of opposition or support among the Israeli population for all of this? Gaza, West Bank, like the settlements. Like where is the Israeli
I have
population?
not seen really recent ones. High support for the settlements, for increasing settlements. Last I saw was continued high support for Lebanon and Iran. I haven't seen anything on Gaza. The one support piece that Netanyahu has a problem with, and his own press is nailing him for this, is actually Donald Trump. It's we talked about this in a previous episode, but it's
Mm-hmm.
worth repeating because Americans don't hear this at all. In the United States, I see, if you see any news on this at all, you kind of see news that Israel is leading the U.S. around by the nose, and
Mm.
that we got into this because Israel and Netanyahu drew us into this. It is the exact opposite
Yeah,
in Israel. Israelis
yeah.
firmly believe that it was Donald Trump who led Benjamin Netanyahu into this massive, massive majority in polls on all
We're
sides
talking
of the
about
political
Iran.
spectrum. The whole thing, but yes, for
Well, I
Iran,
mean, but Gaza
Not
happened
Gaza.
in
No, thank you. Yeah,
yeah.
no, not Gaza. You are correct, Iran. But also that now they believe that Netanyahu is being too soft by listening to Trump when he says we have to have a ceasefire. The Israeli people want to continue in Lebanon. They want to continue in Iran, and Netanyahu's looking bad when he does things that Trump wants. So that's the one place that is really starting to hurt him a little bit. I don't know exactly how
That
much
that
that's turning into anything.
so I haven't heard it expressed like that, but I know I heard about some kind of report that suggested about 80% of the Israeli population supported continuing the war and the actions in Gaza and increased military action in the West Bank.
Yeah,
That's horrifying to me.
it is. It absolutely is. This is an entire
So there really isn't
population
opposition.
of people. And I'm going to use the Mandy Patinkin story, and other Jews have said this exact same thing. I did not have any relatives in the Holocaust, but Patinkin talks about the fact that the people who survived the Holocaust should not be turning around and doing the same thing to others. The Israeli government wants you to believe that because the Jewish people survived the Holocaust, they're faultless and blameless and can do no wrong. That's just not right. And there are plenty of moral, ethical people who are Jews, forget about any other critics, who see that this is just horrific what's happening.
And it is fueling anti-Semitism around the world
Yes,
because Netanyahu has consciously, and the far right in Israel, have tried to conflate Israel, Judaism, and the Jewish people, those three things,
absolutely.
as synonymous, and they are not.
Yeah. I've
Yeah.
actually been saying that pretty much since the first
Oh, yeah,
anti-Zionist, anti-Semitic
for sure.
comments came out.
Yeah.
Yes, anti-Semitism is on the rise, and it's the leadership in Israel that is pushing it even harder and making it look bad and making it look worse. By the way, this doesn't mean people should blame Jews. They shouldn't. But when you have that visceral, emotional reaction of anti-Semitism, it unfortunately is easier for more people to have that reaction when you see an Israel that is out there killing people, raping people coming in on boats, killing children. These are all things that Israel has done, and they've done in the news, and we've gotten plenty of reports on it. This stuff
There's
isn't false.
video evidence of it,
Yeah.
right? Like uh, the 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 hardest part is if there's no when it is the overwhelming, like a super majority of the Israeli population supports all of this.
Right.
Uh, and Israel and the Israeli population, whether or not they are observant or not, do refer to Israel as a Jewish state,
Yes.
then it becomes more problematic for Jewish people around the world.
Absolutely.
Because they do, because the Israeli population, in some sense, does pretend to speak not just for the state of Israel, right? That there is a level in which they claim to be speaking for the Jewish people, just like, say, both Iran and Al Qaeda claim to be speaking for Islam.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the
They're
other
not,
things we're
but
seeing.
the claim is important because those things have fueled Islamophobia and
Yeah.
this fuels anti-Semitism. There's direct responsibility and profound frustration with the lack of opposition among the Israeli population to what is happening.
Absolutely.
And
They're
has
also
been.
about.
It didn't start in October of
No.
2023. Gaza's been a ghetto, just like Warsaw was a ghetto.
Well,
And I say
Hamas
just like,
exists because of that Israeli government behavior.
yeah,
That's why
yeah,
Hamas
yeah,
was created, to fight against those Israeli
yeah.
policies. And people back that horrific, radical terrorist organization because of Israeli
Yeah.
policies.
And I
And
use
it
the
was a
words
backlash.
just like consciously and purposefully.
Yes.
Israel ghettoized the Gaza population consciously, purposely, actively, strategically,
Yes.
just like the Nazis did to Jews in Poland,
Yeah.
particularly in Warsaw.
Yeah. And
The
that's
same
not,
kinds of consequences:
that's,
starvation, lack of water, lack of power, lack of
yeah.
healthcare, lack of education, and
You,
constant
you
attacks
know,
and murders.
we need a word for ironic that is evil. because it's not ironic that the Israeli government's doing this. It's evil
It's
that the
evil.
Israeli government's doing this, but there's got to be a word that combines those two together, Iranville or something like that. It's just terrible. It's really, these are bad, bad people. The other side of it is that was, by the way, an official view of one of the members of this podcast, that these are bad, bad people.
Can I
And
also add, because you were talking about
yes,
the typical behavior of those extremists who are, I hate the word settlements, who are invading the West Bank and
yeah.
seizing territory
I
of
actually think I think we can
Palestinian
use
citizens.
settlement because the war crime is settling. So
I know, but
that
it sounds too kind.
yeah, yeah, I
And
agree.
and it does not evoke the imagery of what actually is happening. They
Yeah.
are invading, they are killing, they are evicting people every bit the way that Jewish people were evicted from their homes across Europe
By the way, if you
and
want to see
having their
something
property seized, right?
if you want to see something really unsettling, you talked about it. Everyone should watch one of the Mandy Patinkin videos or all of them. Look up a video of an Israeli settler
Yeah,
in the West Bank being
yeah.
interviewed. There are
Mm.
multiple of them out there
Oh
being
my God.
interviewed about the expansion and about attacking the Palestinians. And oh my God, is it just absolutely horrific
They
how
sound like
happy
Nazi
they are.
zealots from the 30s.
Yeah, just
The
incredibly
language, the
happy.
tone, the the almost crazed mentality.
Yeah,
It's really disgusting.
yeah.
Um, uh,
So where are we?
in a dark place.
Yeah, and I don't know that there's a whole lot more we need to say. This isn't likely to change anytime soon. The Trump administration is supportive and is not going to question anything. The world has turned away from the situation. The Israeli government, Netanyahu's government, is taking advantage
How
of
do you
the world
explain
turning
that?
away.
Is that
How do you,
because of the U.S.?
them turning away?
Yeah, the world sort of not paying as much attention.
Unfortunately, explaining how the world's turned away is pretty easy. It's a combination of human nature and the way the press works and money. First, we need to remember, Joel, that the world and the world press have the attention span of a very large turnip. And I'm going to credit them for a large turnip as opposed to a small turnip this time around, because I think the press understands that this story exists, but they are in it for the money and they follow the stories that their advertisers want them to follow, and they follow the politically correct stories. And Israel doing damage in Gaza and the West Bank is certainly not something that can go on US news, and frankly in some European countries, UK as an example, too. It's not something that would be popular news. The other side of this, too, is Israel has a long history. So the world gets too crowded to report on everything. Think about it. There's Ebola in the Congo. Maybe you hear about it once a day, and it's killing thousands of people now. There are wars going on, killing a lot more people than this. We hardly ever hear about them. And there, right now, we have Iran, and we have Ukraine to a lesser extent, and we have Trump, who are sucking up all the oxygen in the news.
In
And that
America.
but in other countries too.
Mm.
Trump really dominates news because he is so sadly important to the world, and his
Yeah.
actions are so important. And they just follow the story that they think the money is at. They don't, report in any way, shape, or form objectively. Even if you've got a great reporter who wants to get the objective news out, the media organizations are not objective. So we're not seeing this stuff, and some ignorance there, some politics there, some money
Um, I guess related, before all of this, I don't know where we want to put the date, but certainly mid 2023,
there.
Netanyahu was facing ouster and arrest. There were
Oh
the
yeah,
Israeli people were occupying the streets. Like, we're not talking about the episodic no kings crap
no,
here. Like,
right up to October 7th.
there
Yeah,
was general strike. There were people on the streets not going to work. The economy was shut down. Like, he he was facing ouster and arrest, right?
Right. Yep.
Uh,
I do
at that
know.
time, like if you had done polling of the Israeli population, the people even on the streets opposed to the government, like what do you think would have been their attitude towards all-out war against Gaza and seizure of territory in the West Bank?
So Gaza and the West Bank, if you said that there was a terrorist incident, they'd all be in favor. So that is certainly there. His lows,
But
by the
in
way, were.
general, absent that, would there have been?
I don't know that there would have been. It's hard to say though, because frankly, what happens in these cases, a Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu in particular makes up a reason to go in. And
Yeah,
given a reason to go in, the Israelis are going to typically support action there. If the reason's there, they massively supported action in Lebanon and Iran, as we talked about. So, top of my head, ratings for Netanyahu got as low as 30%
yeah,
pre-October 7th. I just did a very quick look up, quick and sloppy. Take this for what it's worth. The first search, his ratings are hovering around 40, 41, 42% right now. And they went over 50% for the first time with the attack on Iran. So
yep.
that was the first time that since before October 7th that he had gone up into the positive rating. He stayed negative even during the crisis. But Israelis don't usually vote against people during crises and during
Right.
wars. So the question is, how sick are they of this conflict? And they're not sick of
It doesn't seem like
Iran
they're
and
sick of
Lebanon.
it at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Um,
I mean, I think Netanyahu is he's certainly working toward keeping his Teflon covering and finding a way to get a win out of a 30% approval rating, in this case by getting a lot of people killed.
um,
And I want to be clear on that, by the way. On October 7th, Hamas attacked. But one of the things that came out early after that destroyed Netanyahu's credibility was that Netanyahu had been responsible for supporting Hamas. And he
correct.
had been allowing other countries and encouraging other countries to build up Hamas to split the Palestinians more.
Yes,
So, Hamas was able to rearm in no small part because
because
Netanyahu
of
put his
Netanyahu.
blessing on it. And that
Yeah,
was Israeli news. That
yeah,
that was not
yeah.
U.S. news. That was
Right,
Israeli news.
right. This isn't conspiracy theory stuff. This conspiracy actually
Right,
happened. Yeah.
right.
Um, to what extent? Obviously, the United States of America historically has played a major role in Israeli politics and Israeli actions. Um, my view is that has diminished quite a bit. We support, but we don't guide their military or strategic actions. To what extent does the United States retain the ability to influence an outcome? In other words, if somehow we snapped our fingers and I don't know, AOC were president,
Right.
uh, would the United States be able to significantly change Israeli behavior towards the West Bank and Gaza, do you
It,
think?
you used the wrong word when you said president, because it's not the president that's important, it's who
Mhm.
is the president. So if you snap your fingers and AOC becomes president, we probably go back to basically zero in terms of our ability to get Israel to do anything. Donald Trump is president at the moment seems to have as much influence over Benjamin Netanyahu and Israeli policy as any US president that I can remember. And I think a big part of that is a combination of internal US politics. APAC, the American Israeli Political Action Committee, has proven themselves in the last two elections stronger than I remember them since the 70s, frankly. They really came, at least when it went out into the public again, but they showed
This year
their
they've been getting
strength.
wiped out. Is there a race that their supported candidates have won?
The only ones that what they did was they did some behind the scenes stuff. So like
Uh,
that Kat Abou-Gazala up in the north suburbs of Chicago, she didn't win, and people believe that's in part because they supported a candidate who took votes away from her. So
mm,
they've been doing those kinds of things
that
too.
kind of stuff. Anyway,
Anyway, but the other side of it is Trump supported Netanyahu heavily in terms of not criticizing, but also in the war in Iran. And the war in Iran has become ours
but
instead of
but
Israel's.
but is that really Trump influencing? Like, it's Trump supporting what Netanyahu wants to do. Like,
Trump influencing, Trump has now specifically, and we know Trump has asked Netanyahu to hold off hostilities in Lebanon twice in the past several weeks since
and he's
the
probably
peace
asked him
deal.
to increase hostilities in Lebanon twice in the last week.
He may
Trump,
have.
I'm not. We
He
can't
may
talk
have.
about Trump. I mean, what I'm trying to suggest is, in the 1990s, the Clinton administration, like, Israel couldn't do anything if the United States said don't. And
Israel
Israel
had
can do stuff now when the United States says don't.
I don't agree that Israel was really in a place in the 90s where they couldn't do anything. There were
But they
better
wouldn't.
relations, but they wouldn't. But that was also better relations and a
Yeah.
different prime minister.
Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
people in the
Okay.
roles are important too. I've never been one who thinks the U.S. has an enormous amount of influence over what Israel can do. I've
Okay.
always looked at them as, you know, our junior partner that tends to have more control over us than we have over them.
Okay. So
But we can
basically, the
disagree on
answer
that.
is no. Then the United States, in other words, a change in American administration isn't going to
No,
profoundly affect the situation in Gaza or the West Bank. I think that's
no,
what I'm getting at.
no, it's not. And I still don't think an American president can turn completely against Israel. I think Obama would have if he could have. He personally seemed to be much more pro-Palestinian.
Harris would have
But
been much stronger against what Netanyahu
I'm
was
not so
doing.
sure about that. I think Harris
Oh,
would
I
have been very
am.
similar.
She was a voice inside the Biden administration that very much differed from
Yeah,
what
but
Biden
look at
was doing.
how much she moved toward the middle and didn't talk about it when she was running. And that's, you know, the
That
politics
was
of being
idiotic.
president. Yeah, the
That
politics
was
of being
idiotic.
president make it weird.
But
Yeah.
that wasn't her. That was Biden's people taking over her campaign. But that's another
Yeah,
conversation.
that's a different argument.
Yep. Yeah.
I think unfortunately we're running short on time, and
Yeah.
we could keep going for days, and we'd be getting into a lot of more details on the same stuff.
We would. Thank you for tuning into this update. Thank you, Brian, for your expertise on Gaza. Uh, please
Happy to do it.
like and support, spread the word about the World Discord podcast. We will be back to our Who Benefits series in the next episode. And thank you for tuning in. And David, thank you for producing. Brian, you got a last word?
Goodbye, all.
Goodbye, all.